Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Arif Siddiqui, and I am this year's president of the student organization, UT Dallas No Labels. Founded in 2010, No Labels is a national organization comprised of Democrats, Republicans, and independents whose purpose is to combat increasing partisanship in Washington and across the country over the past few years. As part of the grassroots movement, UT Dallas No Labels' mission is to increase political awareness on campus. We fulfill this mission through our weekly meetings, where we invite students from all political backgrounds to discuss a recent news issue over some chips and queso. We also host monthly outreach meetings, where we invite other groups on campus for a discussion over the issues they represent. After Congressman O'Rourke embarked on his bipartisan road trip with Congressman Will Hurd, we knew we had to get him to UT Dallas to talk about his experiences as a congressman and engage with students on this campus. I invite all of you to come to our meetings, Thursdays at 5:30 in the Phoenix Room in the Student Union. Please take a minute after the event to like us on Facebook at UT Dallas No Labels to keep up to date with our events. I now invite to the stage Aya Husseini. Aya was instrumental in coordinating the event with the campaign and will be introducing Congressman O'Rourke today. Aya?
Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules and from studying for midterms to be here with us today. No Labels at UT Dallas is excited and honored to have Congressman Beto O'Rourke here on campus. Congressman O'Rourke proudly serves Texas's 16th district, which includes the city of El Paso, and has been a sitting member of Congress since 2013. He currently sits on the House Armed Services Committees and the Committees on Veteran Affairs. Congressman O'Rourke, prior to his time in Washington, D.C., served as a member on El Paso's City Council. He is a fourth-generation Texan, a father to 3 wonderful children, a former business owner, and a former punk rock star. Now, Congressman O'Rourke has gained a lot of national attention this past spring. First, when a snow blizzard canceled his flight to Washington, D.C., he, along with Republican Congressman Will Hurd, Facebook live-streamed their bipartisan road trip from San Antonio, Texas, all the way to Washington, D.C., in order to make it on time for the House floor votes. And secondly, most notably, in March, he formally announced his senatorial bid seeking the Democratic nomination to contest Senator Ted Cruz. So please help me welcome to the stage Congressman Beto O'Rourke.
How's everyone doing? Pretty good? Well, it's an honor to be here, and I want to thank you and Arib and the team that helped to put this together for inviting me out to be here and bringing all these amazing people into the room so that we can have a conversation about the future of this country and the state of Texas and the role that each of us is going to play to make sure that it is a positive one. As you probably know from the introductions, I'm currently a member of the House of Representatives, and I represent the community of El Paso, Texas. Anybody been to El Paso? Yeah? Anyone from El Paso? What high school? Del Valle? Chapin. Coronado, Thunderbird. And you still turned out okay. You made it to college. Yeah, one more. Burgess Mustangs, all right. So Franklin. So I'm El Paso High, La High. And El Paso, perhaps for you as well, is a big part of who I am. For those of you who've not been to El Paso before, you've got to come. And let me know when you're going to be there, and I'll make sure that you have an amazing time. I'll make sure that you go to Lucy's, which is this diner on Mesa Street where you can get the world's best machaca. I'll take you over the bridge to Ciudad Juarez, and for those of you who are old enough, we will buy a margarita at the Kentucky Club, where apparently they invented the margarita, and where when I met my wife on a blind date, I took her because I knew that if she loved it, that there was going to be a connection, and she did. And she got that we live in this incredibly magical place, unlike anywhere that I've been to around the world. It's this truly binational community. El Paso, Texas, about 1 million people. Ciudad Juarez, about 1.5 million, and then southern New Mexico, Las Cruces, Doña Ana County, almost 3 million people come together. These two nations, two languages, two cultures, two laws come together, and they form one people in the Chihuahuan Desert at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. And it also, for those of you who don't know, happens to be one of, if not the safest cities in the United States today. And it has been routinely for like the last 20 years. There's this group called CQ Press, and they take the FBI crime stats and they crunch those and they rate cities' relative safety to each other. And El Paso for the last 20 years has been either safest, second safest, or third safest city in the United States. So imagine my surprise, November 8th of 2016, when a guy who's been talking about the border as this lawless war zone, as Mexican immigrants being rapists and criminals who are coming to get us and take our jobs and commit crimes in our community, as someone who helped to generate and played upon the anxiety and the paranoia that some in America have about those who don't look like the majority of America, was elected to be the next president of the United States. And I sure wish that we in El Paso, those of us in this room in Texas, had before that done a better job of telling our story, that El Paso is the safest city, not in spite of the fact that 24% of those that I represent were born in another country. It's the safest city in America, not in spite of the fact that we are conjoined and connected inextricably with Mexico and the rest of the world. It's the safest city in America in large part because of those things. And there's nothing to fear or to be anxious about or to wall off or to seal ourselves away from. There's so much to be proud of and to celebrate and to capitalize on. And that is what I've been trying to do while I was in Congress for the last now almost 5 years. And as my wife charitably said after the election on November 8th, you must not have been doing a very good job of it if this guy won despite your best efforts to tell the rest of the country our story. But we should have started 40 years ago. You all are too young to remember, but in the 1980s, the boogeyman for the United States was Libyan terrorists. And so there was a headline on the El Paso Herald-Post that said, "Libyan hit squad suspected in Ciudad Juarez." It was the precursor of headlines that we saw after 9/11. Al-Qaeda terrorists suspected in Chihuahua, coming to get us in Texas. And then more recently, ISIS training camp on the outskirts of Juarez, Mexico. There have been precisely 0 terrorist organizations, or terrorist attacks that have come through the southern border, our border with Mexico, into the United States to do us harm. Today we're spending $19.5 billion annually to secure that border against the potential that there could be. Northbound apprehensions of immigrants are at an all-time low, the lowest in your lifetime, the lowest in my lifetime, the lowest in the lifetime of my parents. And those who are coming into this country increasingly at our front door, where Texas meets Mexico, are kids, and if they're lucky, kids with their moms fleeing horrific brutality and violence in the Northern Triangle of Central America, the dangerous cities anywhere in the world, bar none, coming to this country as people have done for 230 years to find sanctuary and safety, and to add to and not take from the American dream. I don't know if you all saw this in the news this week, but the Trump administration tried to suppress a report that found that refugees, not just immigrants, not just asylum seekers, but those who are the most desperate and the most vulnerable from the world over, have a net impact to the US economy in the tens of billions of dollars. So either we do it for the right reasons, the moral imperative to take care of those who need that care when we are the wealthiest, most powerful country on the face of the planet, or for our own selfish interests of adding to the economy, to jobs, to positive economic growth, for any reason, following the best traditions and interests of this country, accepting those who have made the choice to come here, the sometimes very difficult choice to come to this country and have chosen the United States, and we're not born into it. That's the way that we need to move forward. And that's the story that we need to tell the rest of the country, especially our friends, our family members, our fellow Americans who are not lucky enough to call Texas home, who don't understand that so much of our prosperity, our success, our security, our safety depends on our connection to the rest of the world. That was part of the impetus for me, sitting with Amy, my wife, to make a decision to not just do my best as a member of the House of Representatives, and I feel like we've done some good work in that position, but to leave our community in El Paso, Texas, of which I'm so fond and so proud, and to leave my son, Ulysses, 10 years old, who's just hitting his stride as a third baseman and a power hitter on his little league team. Leaving Molly, my 9-year-old, who is the most creative, artistic person I've ever met, and leaving Henry, the 6-year-old, who we can't quite figure out his direction yet, except just to piss off his older brother and sister, which he's excellent at. To leave them and not seek re-election in the position that I'm currently in, and try to do something great with you and with Texas in the best interests and for the future of this country. Because if you haven't already come to this conclusion, and I bet you have, or you wouldn't be here, everything that we care about is on the line for this country today. We know exactly what direction we're headed in. When the President of the United States of America says he wants to ban all people of one religion from coming in to this country. We know where things are going when, given our relative security and safety on the border, he wants to spend $25 billion of your money building a 30-foot high, 2,000-mile pure concrete wall to separate us from Mexico. You know where things are going when he attacks the press as the enemy of the people. And I'm a member of Congress, and I'm read into the most secret, classified briefings. I've learned more on the front pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post and some of our newspapers in Texas about the critical issues facing our country so that I can make informed decisions than I have in some cases from those briefings. We are all going to be accountable for the decisions that we make right now, knowing where this country is headed. I'm going to have to face Ulysses and Molly and Henry, who are going to say, Dad, when all this stuff was going on, where were you? What did you do? Did you stand up? Were you counted? Did you join with others who wanted to do the right thing, as hard as it's going to be, as much of a challenge as they say you face, given the fact that a Democrat has not been elected to the US Senate from Texas since 1988? Someone has not been elected to the US Senate from El Paso since ever? Dad, what did you do? And so we're going to have a great story to tell them that you're going to be able to tell your kids and yourself and your conscience and this country going forward. And when those who succeed us are reading their history books in 2030 or 2050, and they hear about all these proposals to ban Muslims, to build walls, to go to war with the rest of the world. Yesterday it was North Korea, tomorrow it's Venezuela, and it's 6 additional countries at which we're already at war: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Yemen. Those people in 2030 or 2050 are either going to read that this is the year that we lost it all, and the 230-year experiment that is America finally met its match and its end. Or this was the year that we stood up for ourselves and we got off the sidelines and we got this country back on track. And not only did we stop the wall, but we rewrote our immigration laws so that they reflect our values, our interests, the economic reality, and the room that I see here before me. That we decided that no longer are people going to die because they have a pre-existing condition, or they make too much to qualify for Medicaid and too little to afford private insurance. In other words, they're subject to luck and circumstances. We're gonna make sure that healthcare is a human right, and everyone can see a doctor or a provider so they can go to class, look for a job, live to their full potential, write the great American novel, and it can come out of this room because people are healthy enough to do it. It means that we can look forward and see the rest of the world as an opportunity and not a threat, and realize that we cannot rest our foreign policy on the shoulders and backs of the fewer than 1% who have served since 9/11, deployed around the world, fighting these endless wars in Afghanistan, 16 years so far with no end in sight. And then if we're gonna ask them to put their lives on the line, we're gonna define what victory looks like. They're gonna have a strategy under which to work, and we're gonna use the other levers of American power, our diplomacy, our creativity, our power and potential to inspire, to achieve our aims. And we're not gonna be able to do it just by killing enough people that we finally win. We've been killing people for decades. In your name, losing the lives of American service members in the name of this country. And I wonder what we have to show for it, what we will have to show for it going forward. I'm 44 years old. I was 18 years old when I first heard George H.W. Bush announce military operations in Iraq after the invasion of Kuwait. 26 years later, we're still in that country with no end in sight. So it's about stopping that as well and replacing it with something positive, creative, inspiring, that again, I hope comes out of rooms just like this one. This is the opportunity and the potential and the chance that we have right now. When we listen to our fellow Texans, young men and women, and those our parents' age, who are looking for work but can't find a job, who, if given the chance, are going to put in the hours, the time, and the effort, but might need the connection in the form of an education like the one that you're getting here today, or a certification, or an apprenticeship, or just a chance, so that they can have function and purpose and dignity in their lives and make above a living wage and contribute to the success of this state and this country. They're looking for us. They're looking for our leadership. When we're trying to meet the pettiness, the intolerance, the paranoia, the anxiety that seems to grip this country right now, they're looking for us. They're looking for our confidence, our strength, our courage. That's the hallmark traditionally of Texas. That's who we need to be again. Wouldn't it be great for all the things that we're concerned about and we want to stop in this country, all of the things that we want to achieve and lead on, if that came from here, from Texas, from this room, for the people who have made a decision that everything's on the line and they're willing to stand up and be a match for it and lead and make something extraordinary happen for this country. That's what brought me here today. I hope that's what brought you out as well. And I want to make sure that in the time that we have left, you drive the conversation. And I take from this your best ideas, your suggestions, the concerns that are on your mind, the things that inspire you, energize you, and motivate you, and make that part of this campaign. And the story that we tell as we leave Dallas, as we go to other parts of the state, and the things that are on our mind as we serve you in the U.S. Senate going forward. So for everyone who took the time to come out today, let me say thank you. For everyone who organized this and made it possible, I'm grateful. And I'm looking forward to what you have to say, to hearing what's on your mind and doing my best to respond. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am the No Labels Vice President, Michelle Landry, and I will be starting today's discussion off with questions prepared by UT Dallas No Labels, as well as UT Professor Dr. Thomas Gray and his American Government class. We will then transition into questions submitted by today's audience. Our first question involves No Labels' mission of bipartisan solutions. The UT Dallas chapter of No Labels took a particular interest in your bipartisan road trip with Congressman Will Hurd. What made you decide to embark on the road trip, and how has it affected your view on bipartisan policymaking?
So the quick story, Will Hurd and I were both in San Antonio visiting veterans hospitals and medical centers and vet centers, And we learned that our flights back to Washington, D.C. from San Antonio to get back to work had been canceled because of a snowstorm on the East Coast. And jokingly, I suggested to Will that we rent a car and drive from San Antonio to Washington, D.C., about 1,600 miles. And he called my bluff and said he'd love to do that. And then just to make it interesting, we live streamed the whole thing because I was intent on setting the Guinness Book World Records for the longest live stream bipartisan congressional rolling town hall ever. And 36 hours later, we pulled it off. And we talked about healthcare, we talked about immigration, we talked about our foreign policy, we talked about the involvement of Russia in our elections, and we talked about a million other things that were suggested by the more than 2.5 million people who followed us and contributed their comments and questions along the way. And we also got to know each other and break down some of our natural political defenses against somebody who sits on the other side of the aisle. And when we came back, an immigration bill that I had written called the American Families United Act was one that I'd wanted Will Hurd prior to the trip to sign on to, and for whatever reason he hadn't. But following the trip he did, and I'd like to think it's because there was a little bit of trust that built up between us. And typically, Democrats are out there to screw the Republicans and vice versa. And what we see in Will Hurd is an opportunity for a Democrat to sit in that seat instead of Will, the Republican, so that we can build a majority and get our stuff done. As soon as Will knew that I saw him as a friend, as a colleague, as a partner, and not as an enemy or a threat, he was more willing to work with me and I with him, and I signed on to some legislation that he had written as well. So it turned out to be something that was incredibly fun. It was an adventure we pulled off. We got to work in time to cast votes on the day that we were driving in for, made a new friend, and we're also able to get some things done that otherwise I don't know would be possible. And I've tried to continue my work in Congress in that same spirit. Almost everything that I introduce in terms of legislation, I do with a Republican colleague. One quick example, the Dreamers, the 800,000 young people, every bit as American as Ulysses, Molly, and Henry, just happens they were born in another country, brought here at a young age. They gave their personal information, where they live, their telephone number, how we can get in touch with them in exchange for some protection from deportation. Now we have a president who at alternate times has vowed to deport them all to protect them here, but certainly is going to end the deferred action for childhood arrivals, the executive order that protects their status right now. So we introduced a bill with a Republican, Mike Kaufman, that would protect the personal data and information of these Dreamers so it cannot be used by immigration authorities for their deportation and removal. Here you have a challenging, contentious issue like immigration, and Democrats and Republicans are showing that we can work together, hopefully bringing our colleagues along with us to do the right thing, to find some common ground, to compromise a little bit and accomplish something in the end. So.
Great, thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
Dr. Thomas Gray, as you were mentioning before, healthcare. He is an American government professor whose class is in the audience today, and he's interested in knowing if you think a bipartisan healthcare plan is possible or even desirable within the current political climate. And if given the option, would you pursue universal healthcare on a party line basis or a bipartisan compromise that aligns less with your political ideology?
Yeah. That's a good question. I like the way it's asked. Here's the way I understand things as they are right now. We have healthcare policy that we refer to as Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act that ensures that if you have a pre-existing condition, if you have a very expensive to treat condition, that there are no bars because of that condition or the expense of that condition in getting coverage. They attempted to expand Medicaid. Texas was successfully able to stop that so that more people who could otherwise not afford insurance are able to enroll in what is essentially a public option. They tried to increase the competitiveness of local markets so that more people are on insurance, and they made a mandate, meaning it's the force of law for you to be insured or to pay a fine so that more healthy people are on the rolls so that it balances out the costs, premiums come down, and deductibles are manageable. While it is better than what has preceded it, and it has doubtless saved countless lives, it is far from perfect. And there are still more than 4 million of our fellow Texans who don't have insurance, means they can't see a doctor, means that their conditions aren't treated, means that when I was in Hondo, Texas, I met a woman who came to a meeting just like this and in tears told me about her mother who had just died from cancer, had worked at Dairy Queen in Uvalde for 29 years, not a day of that with health insurance, health care, the ability to see a doctor, so that by the time they found out she had cancer, it was too late to treat effectively, and she was gone before they knew it. We all have stories like that in our lives, in our communities, within our family. That, to me, as an American, is unconscionable. We could spend far less, far more effectively, treat far more Americans, and see far better outcomes. Lives lived longer, potential fully realized, people not chained to their job because that is a source of their health care, so they're free to create their own business or works of art or quality of life in their community. That is the potential if we can improve the Affordable Care Act. But the first thing we got to do, and this is where you come in, is save at least what we have right now. It's under attack. There's a bill on the floor of the Senate right now called Graham-Cassidy, which would essentially repeal the Affordable Care Act and move millions of Americans, we don't know how many yet because it hasn't been scored, from health care, the ability to see a doctor, the ability in some cases to live. So let's save what we have, then let's improve it. Let's expand Medicaid. Let's have what's known as a public option so that you on the exchanges could buy Medicare, could buy Medicaid. And then yes, to the question, yes, let's get to universal healthcare. Let's ensure that every single American has the ability to see a provider, can afford their medication, gets the help they need to get back on their feet, to stay healthy, to take care of their families, to live to their potential. The only way that I understand that you can get there is through what is called a single payer model, where you have one payer like Medicare or Medicaid, or we can call it Trump aid. Doesn't matter to me as long as we're helping people out. That ensures that doctors are focused not on resolving differences with the insurance company, not on trying to get reimbursed and paid by Aetna or Blue Cross Blue Shield, but on taking care of that person, that patient, that human being that's in front of them. And that's the path that I think we need to take to get there. And yes, I think there will be bipartisan consensus. It'll be up to you in the public pressure that you produce that will form the political will and the backbone and the opening and opportunity to find some compromise and consensus on perhaps the most important issue facing us, at least domestically, in this country.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question.
And now we're going to hand it off to Sarah Whipple, who is going to talk about your questions that the audience has asked.
Great.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Congressman, for being here. We received hundreds of questions through our social media and through note cards present today, but we've narrowed them down to about 30. I think we have 20 minutes, so let's see if we can get through all of them.
Just make them all yes, no,
yes,
and we're done.
Check the box. So we're going to start with a question. We have a lot of great questions about issues. We're going to start with a question about how you came here, how you got into this job. It's a question from Carla Ramazan, who is an undeclared student here at UTD. And she asks, before you became a congressman, you had jobs in fields from startups to punk rock. What made you choose to transition to political life, and what advice would you have for students considering this path?
So I started a small business in El Paso, Texas in the late 90s. And part of meeting people in the community involved volunteering for anything, any organization that would have me. And then just busting my ass to show that I was somebody that you could trust, who could deliver, who could get the job done. And begin to build my reputation in the community. As I did that, I fell in love with the organizations for whom I was volunteering, with the community at large, and it got me thinking about ultimately running for city council, which I did in 2005, and had the chance to represent Coronado High School and all through the west side and down into Segundo Barrio and the community I live in now in Sunset Heights. But before that, you mentioned punk rock, and I'll tell you, when I was a kid, born in '72, growing up in the '80s, reared on Beatles albums that were in my parents' record collection, the crap coming in off the radio was unlistenable to me. And I didn't totally know why. In hindsight, I can tell you it was overproduced, it was slick, it was market tested, it was focus grouped, it was poll driven. It wasn't real rock and roll. And a friend of mine, when I was probably 14 or 15 years old, took me to a punk rock show. And what is punk rock? It's nothing more than rock and roll stripped down to its bare bones, to its essentials, to its essence. It's young people, probably not too much older than I was at the time, writing their own songs, telling their own stories in the most direct, authentic, honest way possible. And it just was fucking amazing to me. And I just transformed my life. And so like any good kid at a punk rock show, and all of us have done it who've been to them, you know, we formed our own band. We put out our own magazines. We booked our own tour. We started our own record label. We put out our own records. We did it ourselves, just like these other bands that we were seeing. And we toured the country. We booked our own tour, going city to city to city. I remember going to Denton, Texas in 1993 and playing a show in Denton, which was incredibly fun, and doing that all over the country and Canada. And there's something about what we're doing right now that reminds me of that, because just like there was corporate rock and roll, and there still is corporate rock and roll on the radio, there's corporate politics. There are those who suck up to the money, who hire the consultants and the pollsters to determine what their message is, what they're going to talk about, where they show up. Don't show up at college campuses and talk to young people. They don't vote. That's what a consultant would tell me if I were dumb enough to hire one. But I'm here because this is where the energy is. This is what I'm interested in. You're the people that I want to represent. And it's that same feeling I had when we were all piled into Arlo's station wagon, touring the country, singing our songs, sharing our stories, listening to the bands that were playing in those local communities. It's incredibly powerful, really honest. It's the life that I want to lead. It's incredibly exciting to me, and I'm so lucky to be doing it this way. And so, in case you didn't know, we don't take any political action committee money. So no PAC money, no corporate cash, no special interests. And the kicker for me, the surprise for those who are watching this race is, over the last 3-month period, we raised $2.1 million. Average contribution was $44. Most of it came from Texas. And I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Ted Cruz. He's the junior senator right now in Texas, who ran for president and almost won the Republican nomination, has this massive national fundraising base, takes PAC money. He's a poster child for taking PAC money. He raised $500,000 less than we did. That's the power of people, of doing this the right way, of showing up, being present, being honest, and putting 100% of my faith in you and the other people of Texas instead of the corporations and the special interests. So this is as punk rock as we can run this campaign, and it feels good. So all of that has contributed to the way that I serve in the House, to the way that we're running this race, formed part of who I am just as much as El Paso did. So thanks for the question.
Right. Of course. Now we're going to move into the issues. Our first question comes from one of our student veterans at UTD, Howard Bishop. Howard asks, as a member of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, do you support expanding federal veterans benefits to cover graduate level education?
Yeah, we just made some really important reforms to the GI Bill. So this is the earned benefit. You put your life on the line. You enlisted. You agreed to serve your country and do whatever we asked you to do. And in return, we're going to make sure that you can get into the VA for primary health care, or specialty health care, mental health care. We're going to make sure that you have help when you're buying a home, when you're in civilian life and looking for a job. And we're going to make sure that you're competitive for that job and trained for the thing that you want to do by having access to the GI Bill. There was a limit, though, to the eligibility for that GI Bill. It was 15 years. And there were some other limitations on how that earned benefit could be used. I think we all realize that an investment in the education of a veteran, or really any other American for that matter, is something that is paid back many, many times over, both economically in terms of earning potential and taxes paid, but also in the creative power that is unleashed when someone gets to spend time here at UT Dallas, when someone is being able to learn from an extraordinary professor, is in the classroom with other people who challenge their conventions, the assumptions that they have made. And so absolutely we've got to do that for each other, and absolutely we've got to extend the benefits earned by our service members to allow them to pursue not just community college, not just undergrad, but graduate school, and potentially other kind of non-traditional educations, nano degrees, certifications, apprenticeships, whatever it is that connects you with your potential and the ability to do what you were destined to do in life. Let's make sure that you have the help to do that.
All right, thank you so much. We have another question here from Roma Venkateswaran, who is a theater and political science major here at UT Dallas. And Roma was interested in your stance on instituting congressional term limits. She asks, why are you passionate about this issue as a congressman?
So the front runner in the race to succeed me in the House of Representatives to represent the 16th District in El Paso is a hero of mine, our county judge. Her name's Veronica Escobar. And if she wins, and if she's the next representative for the 16th District, she will be the first Hispanic woman to represent a congressional district in the history of Texas. And that blows my mind that it's 2017, that election will be 2018, and that will be, if she wins, the very first time. When you look at the institution in which I serve, 435 members in the House, 100 in the Senate, it looks nothing like this room here. It looks nothing like the United States of America. The re-election rate for a member of Congress, House or Senate, over the last 50 years is 93%. You have to really screw something up to lose your race or retire or die in office, all of which happen. If we want that institution to reflect the talent, the life experience, the perspective that we see in this room and beyond, then we have to introduce a limitation on the amount of time that someone can serve. And I think if George Washington was able to go in, get the job done for 8 years, and then get out of the way, if almost every single president who succeeded him but one was able to do the same, if many of our major cities, the mayor can only serve 8 years, what is so special about a member of Congress that their tenure is not measured in years but in decades? It helps to explain some of the dysfunction in that institution, because you could get the job done this year or next year or the year that follows. When you have a set horizon, it introduces some urgency, and here's what it does. It forces our faith in each other. I know, and that's why I'm voluntarily subscribing to term limits in the Senate. If elected, I would serve no more than 2 terms. That's a total of 12 years, plenty of time to move things forward, to represent this state's interests, and then to get the hell out of the way so that someone will do just as good or more likely a better job and bring their life experiences and perspective to bear on the problems of this country. That's how you get a more responsive, reflective Congress, one that actually gets things done. It is in us trusting in each other, and I trust in Texas, so I want to serve Texas, and then I want to get out of the way so an even better Texan can succeed me. So that's where I am on term limits. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for that answer. We have another question from Shravan Vigilapuram, a finance student here at UTD. And Shravan asks, what can federal legislative bodies do to address the opioid epidemic?
Couple of thoughts on this. One is we've got to end the war on drugs. We've got to take stock of the fact that we imprison more of our fellow Americans than does any other country on the face of the planet. So we think about the worst, most autocratic dictatorships and regimes on the globe. The United States is worse than all of them in terms of our rate of imprisonment, mostly for nonviolent drug offenses. 30 states in the Union have decided to end the criminalization of marijuana, to lift the prohibition. And we can take some comfort in the example that they have set, and the fact that the sky has not fallen and the world has not ended, that there is a responsible, rational way to do this that will ensure that kids in our high schools and our middle schools, who we should really be concerned about, who have almost unfettered access to marijuana today, can be prevented from buying it, that the proceeds will not go to the cartels and the criminals and the kingpins, and will not continue to corrupt countries like Mexico and our own democracy here, and that we can put resources and focus and attention to the public health crisis that we have before us with the opioid addiction and epidemic. And I think that when we start thinking about each other as human beings who are worthy of our compassion instead of criminals who should be locked up behind bars, we're going to have much better outcomes in the treatment of our fellow Americans and providing other paths beyond criminal ones, which you're limited to after you've been in jail for a while, that I think are going to guarantee less problems with opioids going forward. We also have to work with, and maybe work is not the right word, conduct better, more rigorous oversight of the pharmaceutical lobby and the industry who've been able legally, in part through their purchased access of members of Congress, to help create the problem in the first place in terms of access and pricing for other non-addictive drugs. So there's a lot of work for us to do, but it involves in part ensuring that we're focused on the right problems, and criminalizing entire peoples, locking people up, spending trillions of dollars on wars that we will not win is not the way to do it.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We have another question here from Amal Lally, who is a political science student. And Amal asks, inequitable school funding is a problem in Texas and throughout America, having a segregating effect between affluent areas and lower income neighborhoods. What should be done on a federal level to make more equitable schools and school districts?
Yeah, this is a great question. And my honest answer is I don't know. I understand the problem and the concern. I get that a quality pre-K through 12 education is the surest path to success in whatever way you want to measure it. It is a great equalizer for America and for different sides of the tracks in the cities of America. But what is the right federal role in pre-K through 12 education? We set the policy framework with things like No Child Left Behind, which was succeeded by the Every Student Succeeds Act. There's some federal funding that is connected to this, but as you probably know, this is largely governed at the local independent school district board level and the state of Texas. So I think in those three capacities, at the federal level, setting the broad policy, at the state level with some of the funding resources and policy, and then at the local level, making sure that there's true equity, we all have to do a better job. And so I'll continue, and if someone's got a better idea on how we do that at the federal level, I'm very open to it. But we've got to do a better job of ensuring that every kid has a chance to succeed in America today. And we know that that is not the case in too many of our especially poorer neighborhoods in this country and in Texas.
All right, we're going to transition to a question based on a current event. As tensions between protesters and police officers mount in St. Louis, Missouri, neuroscience student Danny Yang wants to know, do you see any legislative solutions for the issue of police brutality?
Yeah, this is another one where there are many different responsibilities or layers of responsibility. You have your city council, which oversees the local police department, but you also have federal funding that goes into these police forces that has increasingly militarized local police forces with this incredibly expensive, extravagant, military-style SWAT outfitting, especially for these drug raids that we're conducting in cities throughout the country. So perhaps there can be some conditions set on that funding for more reliable reporting of how violence occurs between police and the citizens that they're sworn to protect and defend, how use of force is reported, and when the police take the awful ultimate step of taking somebody else's life, that there's a full understanding of the conditions, the context, the decisions made, and the accountability and consequences where appropriate. We don't have that reliably in the United States today, and there are too many cities and too many people within those cities who fear those that are hired and they pay through their tax dollars to serve and protect them. And that cannot be a good thing. It's not a good thing for those who fear them. It's not a good thing for our police. One of the reasons that El Paso is the safest city, or one of the safest cities in the United States of America today, is because, for the most part, everyone understands that our local police officers and our sheriff's deputies are there to try to prevent crime or follow up on crimes that have been committed, to facilitate those who want to testify and serve as witnesses. They're not there to take someone's liberty or life or enforce federal immigration law. So I think having a strong, positive relationship between these local police forces and the communities they serve is fundamental. If there's some federal inducement through the funding, the limited funding that we provide to local police forces to do this, I would love to be a part of that.
All right, we're going to transition to a question from Mohammed Husseini, a neuroscience student here at UT Dallas. He asks, what steps do you believe are necessary to show people that climate change is real and move towards decisive policy combating environmental degradation?
It's a great question. There's so many things that we can point to. Over the longer term, my understanding is that prior to the civil war in Syria, that country experienced one of its longest and deepest periods of drought, forcing people out of rural farming communities into the cities, providing perhaps a little bit more tinder for the eventual civil war and violence that has become the worst that we've seen, at least in this part of the world, since World War II. Harvey, Irma, Jose, all the storms that will follow, the intensity of those storms, the frequency with which they're hitting, the level of damage that they're doing. The neighborhoods that we visited in Port Arthur and Orange, or those within Houston, where I met homeowners who said, I've lived here for 40, 50 years, and I've never had the water come into my living room, much less rise 3-4 feet up the walls of my house. The proof is here. And what is encouraging, if there's any encouragement to be found, is there's not liberals or Democrats or Chicken Littles who are concerned about it. It is Republicans and independents and the property owners, regardless of background or party affiliation, who lost their homes, who recognize how real this is right now. In Fort Worth and Dallas, I think you've gone all of September so far without any rain. The severity of the droughts that we're seeing in North Texas and in other parts of the country and the world can be connected to the if not completely man-made, man-contributed climate change that we see in the world right now. And we know that if the planet warms an additional 2 degrees Celsius, that the ability for us to save our planet and to live in the communities that we now call home is significantly undermined and jeopardized. And there's going to be horrific consequence in human life and in property and resources and the competition for those resources. So where do we go from here? Texas has a unique opportunity to lead. We are #1 in the United States for the generation of wind energy. We're beginning to do things like utility scale solar generation in cities like El Paso, Texas. Visiting Lamar University in Beaumont, they are pioneering in carbon capture and sequestration, so we're not releasing it out into the environment. And today in Texas, there are more clean energy jobs than there are fossil fuel energy jobs. That's a great place from which to start. But now we need to have the leadership that will capitalize on that and make Texas a leader, not just here in the United States, but in the country for all the right reasons, the moral imperative, the saving of lives going forward, but also the economic opportunity that we have before us. This is where the world is going, and we have a chance to lead and reap the rewards of leadership on this.
All right, some great insights on that question. We're going to move on to talking about North Korea. Well, we have a question here from Michelle, a historical studies major, who asks, what do you think about the current administration's stance on North Korea, and what should we be doing amidst escalating tensions between our two nations?
A very serious issue. One where if we do end up going to war with North Korea, which is very possible and seems increasingly possible with each day, the death toll will not be measured in the hundreds or thousands, but the hundreds of thousands or millions. There are 28,500 US service members who are stationed in Seoul, South Korea right now, tens of thousands more in Japan, in Guam, in the surrounding area. If at all possible, and I firmly believe it is very possible, we have to be able to resolve this peacefully. And to do that, we're going to have to work with people that we might not always want to work with. Countries like China, countries like Russia, and countries like North Korea. If North Korea's one existential fear is that we are going to forcibly, violently change the regime in that country, and annually we conduct military exercises on the Korean Peninsula where we model the kind of military takeover that would happen in North Korea, where we use increasingly bellicose language about raining fire and destruction down on that regime, where we use more provocative statements that can potentially back that country and its leadership into a corner, we make more likely that we will go to war, not less. When you add to that we invaded Afghanistan in 2001 and of course took out that regime and in part contributed to the regime that replaced it. When we did that in Iraq in 2003, when we did that in Libya, even after the dictator there, Muammar Gaddafi, gave up his nuclear weapons program in exchange from some security and assurance that he would not be deposed, at least not through the United States, and yet we did it anyhow. It's not completely crazy or irrational for the leadership of North Korea to think that their one hedge, their one opportunity to fend off an invasion from the United States, who has described them as evil, is to have a nuclear weapon. I say all that not to condone the North Korean leadership, which is the most brutal, tyrannical, horrific government on the planet today that is starving its own people, that is bringing us in part to the brink of nuclear war. But to tell you that there's got to be a peaceful way out of this. And so if there is some ability to assure that regime that we do not intend to violently take over that country, to kill them, to remove them from power, that if there is ultimately a reunified Korea, we do not want US forces on that peninsula, to assure China that there will be no US service members on the border between Korea and China going forward, an existential fear of theirs, we may open up some common ground for compromise and consensus and ultimately peace. I'd much rather pursue that, as imperfect and frustrating and difficult as that would be to achieve, than war, which we have no idea where it will lead, who will die, how long we will sacrifice, and what the end result will be. So that's the path I would like to pursue, and I'd be happy to support and work with anyone who's willing to find a way to do this peacefully.
Of course. We have a lot of issues on the table today, so we're going to transition to an issue that's very important at the UT Dallas community as a predominantly STEM university, and that is the issues of artificial intelligence and automation. We have a question from mechanical engineering student Andrew Wright, and he asks, what do you believe we should do in response to the integration of automation technology into low and middle skill jobs and to protect the average worker?
I was reading this article somebody sent me last night. Tell me if you've seen it or heard of this concept. It is what would happen if we had more sophisticated and more powerful artificial intelligence and asked that artificial intelligence to maximize the output of paper clips. Anyone read this article? It's this really interesting thought experiment, the conclusion of which is the computers kill off humanity to harvest the atoms within our system to make more paper clips. There's a lot of anxiety and fear, understandably, especially from those whose jobs are at risk or have already been lost, about the adoption and advent of greater, ever more sophisticated technology. I was in Lubbock, Texas, meeting with some cotton growers there. A gentleman had 20,000 acres under cultivation. He had 5 employees. It's the same number of employees that his grandfather had when the farm was 50 acres. Because they have a $1.2 million laser-guided combine, accurate within an inch, that can do the work that it took dozens, if not hundreds of humans to do before. As I went from that meeting to the coffee shop and there were 10 people working behind the counter, I couldn't help but conclude that those jobs may not be there 5, 10 years from now. The people driving long-haul trucks on our interstate system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I also can't help but think that every age of change, the Industrial Revolution, the advent of the automobile, the information revolution, the internet, was met with some of the same anxiety and fear about people no longer being relevant. But in every instance, when we met that challenge with courage, with strength, looking forward instead of going backwards, as we seem to want to do in this country right now, taking jobs from other countries, walling ourselves off, retrenching. When we go forward confidently, then we meet that challenge and we create the jobs that the new set of conditions demand. San Antonio, Texas reportedly is creating 2,000 cybersecurity and information technology jobs a week that they're posting in their newspapers and online that they cannot fill. So in some cases in Texas, especially in these higher value jobs that support increasing automation and information technology, we still have a gap in the talent that we're producing going forward. So it's a really tough issue, but I think we're more than up for the challenge. But we've got to be able to meet it with some confidence, and I'm confident that Texas can do that we can be the leader on this.
Definitely. We've talked about a lot of great issues, and we're almost out of time, so I just wanted to transition to one final question about the campaign. And this question comes from Johnny Thomas, who is a biomedical engineering student. He asks, what would you identify as the biggest difference between your campaign and Ted Cruz's, and what is one thing that you would agree with Ted Cruz on?
Look, I don't know much about his campaign. I do know that he was elected in 2012 and sworn into office to serve the people of Texas. And from that position of public trust in which we placed him, he then went to Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina and Nevada and the rest of the country outside of Texas to campaign for the presidency. He shut down the government in 2013 for 16 days on the basis of his ideology and his party affiliation, trying to stop millions of Americans from having health care. He's been unable to find partners, not just on the other side of the aisle, but in Congress at all, to get anything done. He's not accountable or responsive to his constituents. That's what we have from our junior senator today. And if you want more of the same, he's there for you. In the same period of time that I've been a member of the House of Representatives, every single month I'm holding live, open, all-comers, no-holds-barred town hall meetings in El Paso. Not always easy, not always fun, not always pleasant. I always come away a better person from what I learn and from reminding myself that I'm accountable to those that I was elected to serve. Everything of consequence that I've been able to do in the Congress, I've done with a Republican colleague and partner, focusing on those that I was elected to serve, ensuring that we expand access to health care for veterans, that we support our service members who are deployed overseas, and that we facilitate legitimate trade and travel and tourism at our ports of entry and our border and our connection with Mexico. Those are the things that I've been doing. And this campaign is a reflection of the way that I want to serve you. Holding town hall meetings, answering your questions. I didn't see any of these questions beforehand. They were all good and they were all very tough. And in some cases, I don't think I gave you the best answer. I had to admit that I didn't know the answer to your question. But I'm always going to be as honest and direct with you as I possibly can be. And it would be a terrific honor to be able to represent you in the Senate. It's already an honor to be here before you, to work together and hopefully make something extraordinary happen for Texas and the country. And with Ted Cruz, you know what? He's a good human being, a good dad, good person, a patriot, an American. Happy for his public service and his commitment to the country. I don't have anything, personally negative to say about him. So I'm sure he's a wonderful person. So does that work?
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for making some time for me and allowing me to come out. Really good questions, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. Thank you. I really appreciate it.